I understood what you meant the second I saw the number. It wasn't his usual cell. It wasn't a random spam call either. It was one of those blocked but not blocked lines that only ever show up when something is being routed through a corporate switchboard or a compliance hotline. The kind of call you don't ignore, because if it's real, you don't get a second chance to handle it cleanly. Hi, this is corporate compliance. Are you in a place where you can talk privately? I sat up in bed so fast I felt dizzy. My wife shifted beside me, half asleep, and I lowered my voice. Yeah, I whispered. I'm in my bedroom. What is this about? There was a pause, like the person on the other end was confirming they had the right file pulled up. Thank you. I need to ask you a few questions about a request that was made tonight, involving a transfer of funds and an internal approval chain. My throat went dry. A transfer of funds, internal approval chain, and instantly my coworker's last sentence replayed in my head. They already have your name in the chain. I didn't even know what the chain meant yet, but my body reacted like it did. Before we continue, the compliance officer said, can you confirm you're not currently driving or in a public space? I'm home, I said. It's 3 a.m. I was asleep. I understand, she replied, still calm, still professional. I'm going to be direct. Did anyone contact you tonight, asking you to send or approve money? I stared at the darkness of my room, like I might see the answer on the ceiling. Yes, I said. A coworker. He asked for $25,000. Did you send it? No. Did you agree to send it? No. Did he tell you what it was for? I hesitated. Because what he'd said wasn't a reason. It was a threat dressed up as panic. He said, if I didn't, they'd come after him, I answered. And he said my name was already involved. There was another pause. Not confusion, not surprise. The kind of pause that tells you the person on the other end already knew that was coming. Thank you, she said. I'm going to ask you something very specific. Please answer carefully. My hand was shaking so hard the phone vibrated against my ear. Have you ever approved a vendor payment, reimbursement, or emergency disbursement request for him or on his behalf without a second approver? I swallowed. In my head, I flipped through the last year like a filing cabinet. I was a mid-level operations lead at a mid-sized tech company, big enough to have strict policies, small enough for people to bend them when deadlines hit. And I knew exactly why she was asking. Because I'd done it once. Not for him. Not directly. But I'd done something close. 3 months earlier, during end-of-quarter chaos, a purchase order had stalled. A vendor was threatening to pause service. My director was on a plane. Finance was buried. And my coworker, Evan, had walked into my cubicle with a printed invoice and that helpless, we're about to be dead in the water look. He'd said, can you just push it through? I'll clean up the paperwork in the morning. And I'd believed him. I'd logged into the system. I'd clicked approve. I'd left a note like a responsible adult. And then I never thought about it again. Because the service never went down. That's the thing about small compromises. When nothing explodes, you assume you got away with being helpful. But at 3:14 a.m., hearing compliance ask me this question, I realized something I didn't want to admit. If Evan had been building something dirty, my name might be the cleanest thing he had. I approved one invoice during Q4, I said slowly, but it wasn't a cash transfer. It was a vendor payment. Do you recall the vendor name? I started to answer, and then I stopped, because I didn't, not off the top of my head. And the moment I couldn't say it, I heard my own heartbeat in my ears. Loud and ugly, like it was warning me that this wasn't just a misunderstanding anymore. That's okay, she said, and her tone shifted slightly. Still calm, but now sharper, more controlled. Please do not search for it right now. Do not log into any company systems. Do not message anyone. Do you understand? That sentence hit harder than any accusation. Because if compliance is telling you not to log in, it means the system might already be flagged. It means your login could trigger an alert. It means you're not being asked some questions. you're being handled." "I understand," I said. "Good," she replied. "I'm going to give you a case number. Write it down." I grabbed a pen from the nightstand with clumsy fingers and wrote it on the back of a receipt. Then she said, "I also need you to answer one more thing, and this matters. Has Evan ever had access to your credentials? Even briefly, even once?" My mouth went dry again, because I knew the honest answer. Not intentionally, not like I handed him my password, but there had been moments, work trips, shared laptops, late nights, and one specific day when he'd asked to quickly check something on my machine while I went to a meeting. I had left my screen unlocked, because I trusted him, because he was just a coworker, because people do that all the time. And now I was sitting in the dark, realizing that one casual decision could be the hinge that my entire career swung on. I started, and before I could finish, she cut in. "Before you answer, I need you to know we already have audit logs. I'm not asking you to trap you. I'm asking because your cooperation determines what happens next." My stomach dropped. Audit logs, cooperation. What happens next? This wasn't about whether Evan was in trouble. This was about whether I was. I looked over at my wife, still asleep, peaceful like the world wasn't changing in the next room, and I whispered into the phone, "Yes." There was silence. Then the compliance officer said one sentence that made me feel cold all the way down to my feet. "Okay, then I need you to listen closely, because your name was used tonight in an attempt to move money, and whoever did it expected you to be asleep." And that was the moment I stopped being tired, because now it wasn't a scandal. It wasn't office drama. It was a setup, and I was the easiest person to frame, because I had already proven I'd bend the rules when someone asked the right way. I tightened my grip on the pen until my fingers hurt. "What do I do?" I asked. She answered, "First, you do nothing publicly. Second, you don't warn Evan. And third—" She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice dropped like she was stepping closer. "You tell me exactly what he said to you at 2 a.m., word for word, because the way he phrased it tells us whether he's desperate or following a script." And as I started repeating his words, I realized something sickening. Evan hadn't sounded like someone asking for help. He'd sounded like someone reading lines. And I didn't know it yet, but that detail, those exact lines, would be the first crack in the whole thing. Because at the end of the night, it wasn't the missing money that destroyed him. It was the fact that he couldn't keep his story straight. By the time the call ended, the room didn't feel like my bedroom anymore. It felt like a witness box. And then, silence. The kind that means something's gone wrong. I didn't fall back asleep. I just sat there in the dark, staring at the case number I'd scribbled on a receipt, replaying Evan's words over and over like I could find the trap hidden in the syntax. At 6:18 a.m., my phone buzzed again. Same calm voice, same controlled tone. "Good morning, this is compliance again. I'm going to loop in information security and legal. You'll be asked to attend a call at 7 a.m. Please do not access your email or messaging apps before then." So I sat at my kitchen table like a grounded kid, hands wrapped around a mug I wasn't drinking, watching the minutes crawl. At 7 a.m. exactly, the call started. 3 voices, no small talk. A woman from compliance I'd already spoken to, a guy from InfoSec who sounded like he'd been up all night, and a lawyer who introduced herself as internal counsel, like it was a badge and a warning at the same time. "Mark," the lawyer said, "this is not an accusation. This is a fact-finding interview. But I need you to understand the seriousness of what we're discussing." My name felt heavy in her mouth. I said, "I understand." The InfoSec guy didn't waste time. At 1:47 a.m., a wire request was initiated in our payment portal under your credentials, he said. At 1:52 a.m., it was amended. At 1:58 a.m., the request was pushed into the approval workflow with supporting documentation attached. I went cold. "I was asleep," I said immediately. "I didn't do that." "We're aware that's what you're stating," the lawyer replied, voice still flat. "We're not arguing. We're collecting, the InfoSec guy continued, like he was reading weather. The destination account was newly added. First-time payee. The request was labeled Emergency Contractor Remediation and routed through a path that, based on your role, should not be accessible without elevated permissions. My stomach twisted. Then how could it be under my credentials? I asked. There was a pause, and I hated it, because it felt like the pause people take right before they say, "Because you did it." Instead, the compliance officer said, "We need to establish your access patterns. Were you at home between midnight and 3 a.m.? Yes. Was anyone else in the home? My wife. Did you leave your work laptop unlocked at any point recently? At the office, in a meeting, at your desk?" My face warmed with embarrassment and then anger, because I knew where this was going. "I don't hand out passwords," I said. "I've never given Evan my login, if that's what you're asking." The InfoSec guy didn't sound satisfied. "We're not asking if you gave it to him," he said. "We're asking if you created a scenario where he could take it." That sentence hit like an insult, because it was true, and it was still unfair. I explained the one time, the quick check, the unlocked screen, the fact that it didn't feel like a crime when it happened, because it was Tuesday and we were behind and Evan was someone I ate lunch with. The lawyer made a small sound, like she was writing something down. Then compliance said, "You mentioned Evan called you at 2 a.m., demanding $25,000. Yes. Did he reference the wire attempt?" "He didn't say wire," I answered. "He said he needed me to send money. He said if I didn't, they'd come after him. And he said my name was in the chain." The InfoSec guy exhaled through his nose like that confirmed a suspicion. "What?" I asked. "What does that mean?" "It means you were the cover," he said, and I hated how casually he said it. Like my life being used as camouflage was just a technical note. The lawyer cut in, "Mark, I'm going to be direct. While we investigate, we are placing you on a temporary access hold. That means your company credentials will be disabled today. This is standard." Standard. That word makes everything feel colder. "So I'm locked out?" I asked. "I have meetings, deadlines, clients." The lawyer didn't flinch. "You will not perform work until we clear you." It hit me then, not in theory, but physically. If my badge didn't open doors, if my email didn't send, if my Slack didn't exist, the story inside the company would form without me. And companies don't wait for the truth. They wait for the version that protects them fastest. "But I'm the one who said no," I argued. "Evan called me. I didn't send anything. I'm cooperating." "I understand," compliance said, and I could hear the sympathy. But sympathy doesn't pay rent, and that's noted. But procedure is procedure. I wanted to shout. I wanted to ask how a system could let someone initiate a wire under my name and then treat me like the liability. Instead, I clenched my jaw so hard my teeth ached. "Okay," I said. "What do you need from me?" "Your devices," InfoSec said. "Laptop, phone if you use it for MFA. We'll arrange a pickup this morning. Please do not power them off. Do not attempt to log in. Do not contact Evan." I almost laughed at the last part, bitter and sharp. "Trust me," I said. "I'm not exactly eager to chat with him." The call ended at 7:26. At 7:31, my work phone went dead. At 7:33, my laptop kicked me out. At 7:34, Slack stopped loading. And at 7:40, my manager called my personal number. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't ask if I'd been hacked. He said, "Compliance flagged your account. Tell me this isn't what it looks like." The way he said it, "what it looks like," told me everything. He'd already pictured me in the worst version of the story. I swallowed the anger because anger makes you sloppy. "I was asleep," I said. "Evan called me at 2 a.m. asking for $25,000. Compliance called me at 3. I did exactly what they told me." A beat. Then my manager said, "Evan told me you've been acting weird about approvals lately." I felt my hands go cold again, but this time it was pure rage. He was preloading the narrative. He was laying tracks for the train to run over me. But that was just the beginning, I realized, because now it wasn't only Evan trying to save himself. It was the company deciding who was easiest to blame. I kept my voice steady. He can tell you whatever he wants. There are call logs. There's a case number. There's an audit trail. My manager sighed like I was inconveniencing him. Look, he said, just cooperate. Don't make this harder. Harder, as if I'd created the mess by existing. When the call ended, I stared at my blank laptop screen and felt something shift. Not fear, not helplessness, a colder clarity. That night, I stopped being the guy who assumed the truth would win if I was reasonable, because reasonable people get used. I stood up, walked into the living room, and opened the one thing compliance hadn't told me not to touch, my home security app. Doorbell camera, living room motion sensor, time-stamped logs, and there it was, clean as a receipt. From midnight to morning, the only movement in my house was me getting up once to use the bathroom. No late-night driving, no leaving the house, no mysterious trip to handle something. I took screenshots. I backed them up. I emailed them to myself from my personal account. A tiny win. A small breath of control. Not the end. Not justice. But enough to remind me I wasn't powerless. Because if Evan had chosen me as the cover, he'd done it for a reason. He thought I wouldn't fight back. And the next time my phone buzzed, it wasn't compliance. It was a text from Evan. Just 6 words. We need to get our story straight. I stared at Evan's text until my screen dimmed. We need to get our story straight. Not, are you okay? Not, did they call you? Not even, I'm sorry. Straight. Like there was already a story. Like the only problem left was making sure I didn't ruin it. I didn't respond. I took a screenshot, saved it to 2 places. Then I put my phone face down on the table and tried to breathe like a normal person. Because this was the moment I finally understood what was happening. Evan wasn't panicking. He was managing risk, and I was the risk. At 8:22 a.m., my doorbell camera caught a black SUV pulling up. 2 people stepped out, company badges visible, no uniforms. The kind of polite but serious professionals you never want at your front door. One introduced himself as InfoSec. The other was a third-party forensic tech. They handed me a printed form, chain of custody. My stomach turned at how official it looked. I gave them my work laptop, work phone. I even handed over the little USB security key I kept on my keychain. They photographed everything, bagged it, sealed it. Then the InfoSec guy looked at me and said, almost kindly, if you remember anything else, anything that feels small, email compliance from your personal account. Don't call. Email. Keep it clean. I nodded, but my mind was already running, because Evan's text wasn't small. It was intent. It was coordination. It was proof that he wasn't just a victim of some shadowy they. He was part of the machinery. When they left, I did what I should have done immediately after the first compliance call. I wrote down everything. Not vibes, not feelings. Facts. 2:03 a.m. Evan called, demanded $25,000, said my name was in the chain. 3:11 a.m. Compliance called, asked if I'd been contacted. 7:00 a.m. Try call with compliance, InfoSec, legal. Told my credentials were used at 1:47 a.m. 7:40 a.m. Manager called, said Evan claimed I'd been acting weird about approvals. 7:58 a.m. Evan texted, we need to get our story straight. I printed it. People think screenshots are enough? They're not. Screenshots get lost, phones break, apps glitch, accounts lock, paper has weight. I was still staring at the printout when my manager called again. His tone was different now, less suspicious, more annoyed. Mark, he said, Evan is saying you're not responding and it's making things worse. I almost laughed. It's making things worse for who? I asked. He ignored that. Just, pick up if he calls. Compliance needs everyone aligned. That word again. Aligned. Like this was an optics exercise. I'm not taking instructions from Evan, I said. Compliance told me not to contact him. A pause. Then my manager said, fine, but understand how this looks. There it was again. How it looks. No one was asking what was true. So I stopped talking like someone trying to be understood and started talking like someone building a record. I'm emailing compliance, I said, including Evan's text. My manager exhaled like I'd threatened to sue. Do what you have to do, he said and hung up. I didn't hesitate. From my personal laptop, I drafted one clean email. Case number in the subject line. Timeline bullets. Attached screenshots. Attached photo of the printed text. Mentioned my home security log showing I did not leave the residence overnight. I kept it clinical. No anger, no accusations, just evidence. Then I hit send. And for the first time since 2 a.m., I felt something close to relief. A small emotional click, like a lock turning. Because now it wasn't just my word against Evans. Now there was a paper trail before the internal gossip train could finish building speed. 2 hours passed, no response. Then my phone rang. Unknown number, again. I answered. Mark, the compliance officer said, thank you for the email. I'm calling to confirm we received everything. Okay, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She didn't waste time. We need to clarify one point. You said Evan once had access to your unlocked workstation. Yes. Do you remember where you were sitting that day? I closed my eyes and pictured it. Tuesday, the bullpen. My desk near the glass wall. Evan leaning over my chair like we were on the same side of the world. Yeah, I said. I was in the main open area, left side, 2 rows from the conference rooms. Good, she said. And do you recall anyone else being nearby? I thought. And that's when something I'd pushed out of my brain floated back up. A detail I'd dismissed because it didn't feel important at the time. There was a guy standing behind Evan that day, not from our team. A contractor, IT support. He'd had a lanyard with a different color badge, and he'd been helping Evan with a laptop issue. I remembered because Evan had made a joke. Don't worry, he's with the nerd squad. At the time, I'd smiled. Now my stomach clenched. There was an IT contractor, I said slowly. I don't know his name. He was with Evan. Silence on the line. Then the compliance officer said very carefully, thank you. That is extremely relevant. My heart started to pound. Why? I asked. She answered in that same controlled tone, but now there was something underneath it. Pressure. Because the wire request was not only initiated under your credentials, it was routed using a permissions path that suggests someone leveraged elevated access. That generally requires either privileged credentials or someone with temporary administrative rights. An IT contractor, temporary administrative rights. And suddenly Evan's 2 a.m. call sounded different in my memory. If you don't, they're going to come after me. Maybe they wasn't a vague threat. Maybe it was literal, whoever helped him do it. I swallowed. So what happens now? She paused, then said, now we confirm whether Evan was acting alone or whether he had support. And Mark, one more thing. Yes? Her voice dropped just slightly. Do not assume you're the only person being framed. That sentence landed like ice. Because if Evan had used my credentials as cover, then there were probably others. People who didn't have doorbell cameras. People who deleted texts. People who tried to be helpful and made it easy. And right then, like the universe wanted to prove her point, my phone buzzed again. Another text from Evan. This one was shorter, more urgent. Stop emailing people. You're going to ruin it. I stared at it, and something inside me hardened. They thought I was gone. I wasn't. I didn't reply. I didn't threaten. I didn't warn him. I just forwarded that message too. And then I did the one thing that made the next part inevitable. I pulled up my calendar and realized Evan and I had been scheduled to attend an in-person process review the next day, in a small conference room with finance, a meeting I'd always thought was routine. But now it looked like a stage, and I didn't know it yet. But that room, those people, those routine questions, were exactly where Evan planned to steer the blame onto me. He just didn't account for one problem? I had receipts, and I had already moved first. I showed up to the office the next morning with a visitor badge clipped to my jacket like a scarlet letter. Security wouldn't let me pass the lobby without an escort. My credentials were still dead. My calendar was still locked. But the process review was still on. Same time, same conference room, same finance invite, which told me one thing. Someone wanted this, handled in a room, not on email. When the guard walked me down the hall, I saw Evan near the glass-walled conference room, talking fast with my manager. He stopped mid-sentence when he saw me. His face didn't say surprise. It said annoyance, like I'd shown up to a meeting I wasn't supposed to survive. Inside the room, finance, my manager, HR, and two people I didn't recognize. One woman with a compliance badge, one attorney with a notebook already open. Evan sat across from the empty chair they clearly expected me to take. The attorney didn't introduce herself this time. She just said, "We're recording. Everyone understands that." Evan's shoulders tightened. I sat down, placed my folder on the table, and said nothing. Finance started, businesslike. "We're going to walk through the wire request labeled Emergency Contractor Remediation. Evan, you initiated contact with payroll and finance after hours. Explain the urgency." Evan nodded like he'd rehearsed it. "Right," he said. "So, Mark has been pushing vendor payments through lately. He's been stressed. He told me a contractor issue could shut down service and we'd get blamed. He asked me to draft the request so he could approve it. He said it smoothly, too smoothly. Then he added the line I knew was coming. And he left his workstation unlocked sometimes. So I had access to the portal. I assumed it was authorized. My manager looked at me like he'd already decided I was guilty, and this was just the paperwork phase. I didn't move. I let Evan finish building his version of me, reckless, secretive, desperate. Then the compliance officer turned to me. "Mark, your response?" I opened my folder and slid one page into the center of the table. A timeline, clean, time-stamped, no adjectives. "I was asleep," I said. At 2:03 a.m., Evan called me demanding $25,000 house. At 3:11 a.m., compliance called me. At 7:00 a.m., legal and InfoSec informed me a wire attempt was initiated under my credentials at 1:47 a.m. I slid the next sheet over, a screenshot printout. Evan's text. "We need to get our story straight." Then another. "Stop emailing people. You're going to ruin it." The room changed temperature. Evan blinked hard like he was trying to erase the ink with his eyes. He started. "That's not." The compliance officer didn't let him spin. "Evan," she said, "is that your number?" He swallowed. "Yes, but—" "And did you send those messages?" He hesitated half a second too long. "Yeah," he said, "but that was because—" The attorney raised her hand slightly. "Answer only the question asked." Evan's mouth opened, then closed. I kept my voice level. "If Mark is the one who asked you to draft a request," I said, "why did you call me at 2 a.m. demanding personal money? Why not email? Why not Slack? Why not the normal process?" Evan's eyes flicked to my manager like he wanted backup. My manager stared at the table. Finance spoke up, slower now. "Evan, why would you ask a coworker for $25,000 for a company remediation?" Evan tried to smile and it looked like pain. "I panicked," he said. I thought it would be faster to—" The compliance officer cut in again. "You told Mark, quote, they're going to come after me and I'm not going down alone." "Who is they, Evan?" Evan's jaw worked. No sound came out. And then the chaos started. InfoSec, who'd been silent in the corner, opened a laptop and turned the screen so finance could see. "We pulled access and network logs," he said. "The 1:47 a.m. session that initiated the wire did not originate from Mark's home IP. It originated from an internal office subnet, specifically from a workstation in the third-floor bullpen." He clicked once. "And that workstation was signed into by a temporary admin account, assigned to an on-site IT contractor from TechServe." My stomach tightened, because I already knew where this was going. The compliance officer looked at me. Mark mentioned an IT contractor he observed near Evan during a prior unlocked workstation incident. That detail allowed us to narrow the search. She turned back to Evan. "Evan," she said, "did you request on-site IT support yesterday or last night?" Evan's face drained. "No," he said quickly. Too quickly. "I don't even know what that is." InfoSec clicked again. A badge log. "Your building access badge entered the office at 1:29 a.m., he said. "You exited at 2:16 a.m. Evan stared at the screen like it was a hallucination. Finance whispered, "You said you were home." Evan's voice cracked. I came in because I thought there was an outage." InfoSec didn't look up. There was no outage, no incident ticket, no escalation. Silence. Not awkward silence. The heavy final kind. Then the attorney spoke, and her voice went hard. "Evan, I'm going to say this once. We have badge logs, system logs, and a recorded admission from Mark that you contacted him at 2 a.m., demanding personal funds. We also have your texts instructing him not to contact compliance. Do you want to revise any statement you've made in this room?" Evan's eyes went wet. He looked at me, and for a split second I saw it. Pure calculation, even now. Like he was still trying to decide whether he could salvage it by dragging me with him. That night, I realized, I stopped being the guy who gets talked over. So I leaned forward and said quietly, "You tried to use my name because it sounded clean, because I helped you once, because I trusted you. That's why you picked me." Evan flinched like I'd slapped him. The compliance officer stood up. "We're done here." The door opened. 2 security officers walked in. Not aggressive, just inevitable. Evan turned to my manager like a child looking for permission. My manager didn't even meet his eyes. One of the guards said, "Evan, please come with us." Evan's chair scraped back. His hands shook. He started talking fast, half apologies, half excuses, but nobody in that room moved toward him. Because at some point, evidence stops being a version. It becomes gravity. They escorted him out. The room stayed still for a few seconds after the door shut, like everyone was letting their nervous systems catch up. Then the attorney looked at me. "Mark," she said, "your access hold will be reevaluated today. You'll receive instructions. You may also be asked for a formal written statement." I nodded, but I didn't feel victory yet. Not fully. Because I understood the real damage wasn't just the wire attempt. It was the fact that, for a few hours, the company had been prepared to believe I was the easiest explanation. Finance gathered their papers like they wanted to pretend they'd never been in that room. HR avoided my eyes, and as I stood up to leave, the compliance officer stepped close enough that only I could hear her. "You did one thing right," she said. "You documented early. Most people wait until they're already buried." I walked out of that conference room with my visitor badge still on, my hands steady, my chest tight. Evan hadn't been convicted. Nothing was finished. But the story had flipped in real time, right in front of the people who mattered. And as I reached the lobby, my phone buzzed with a new email, subject line from compliance. "Restoration of access, pending final review." I didn't know it yet, but the last step wasn't getting my job back. It was making sure Evan couldn't do this to anyone else. Ever again. By the time I got home, it still didn't feel real. Not because Evan had been walked out. People get walked out all the time. It was the other part that wouldn't leave my head. How quickly everyone had been willing to believe I was the problem. Until I put paper in the middle of the table. That afternoon, compliance emailed again. Short, formal. They restored my access in phases, email first, then VPN, then internal tools, like I was being let back into my own life one locked door at a time. They also scheduled a final statement call with legal for the next morning. And that night, for the first time since 2 a.m., I slept. Not peacefully, but enough. The next day, Legal didn't waste time. The attorney said, "Mark, Your cooperation is appreciated. Your access hold is officially lifted. Your personnel file will reflect that you reported the contact and complied with all instructions. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding for 2 days. Then she added, "There's another matter." Of course there was. She explained it plainly. Evan hadn't just tried to move money once. He'd been using a pattern: small approvals, vendor fixes, emergency exceptions, building a trail that looked like normal operations until he could push something big through. And the IT contractor, the TechServe guy, wasn't some random helper. He'd been called on site repeatedly, always tied to Evan's tickets, always after hours, always with temporary admin privileges justified by urgent internal requests. Compliance had already suspended TechServe's access, and legal was preparing a report for law enforcement and the bank's fraud unit. There would be interviews, statements, possibly subpoenas. That should have made me feel satisfied. But the truth is, my stomach still hurt. Because even though Evan was the one who pushed the button, he'd used something real. My willingness to be helpful. My habit of assuming people were acting in good faith. And he'd turned that into a weapon. After the call, I sat at my desk and stared at my inbox. Hundreds of unread messages, meeting invites, people continuing their day like nothing had happened. And then I got one email that didn't come from legal or compliance. It came from my manager. Subject line, quick sync. 2 words, no apology, no acknowledgement, just business. I walked into his office at 2 p.m. on the dot. He didn't stand, didn't offer a seat. Just looked tired. "Glad you're back," he said like I'd been on vacation. I didn't sit. "I want to understand something," I said. "You told me twice, this is how it looks. You repeated Evan's claim that I was acting weird. You pressured me to pick up his calls. Why?" His eyes flicked away. "Mark, it was a volatile situation," he said. "We had to protect the company." Protect the company, not protect the truth. Not protect an employee who did the right thing at 3 a.m. I nodded once. "Okay." He looked relieved, like I'd accepted the answer. Then I placed one sheet on his desk, a written summary of the incident. Timeline, case number, confirmation from legal that my file reflected cooperation and no wrongdoing. And at the bottom, a short paragraph titled, Manager Conduct and Retaliation Risk. His face tightened. "What is this?" "It's documentation," I said, because if my access had stayed locked for one more day, the narrative would have been permanent, and you were helping it along. He started to speak, defensive, rehearsed. So I cut him off, still calm. "I'm not threatening you," I said. "I'm making sure nobody gets to quietly rewrite what happened." Silence. He stared at the paper like it was radioactive. Then he said softer, "What do you want?" And that was the moment I realized this wasn't about revenge, not the dramatic kind. This was about closing the loop so I could breathe again. "I want 3 things," I said. 1. Confirmation in writing that I'm cleared. 2. My role and performance record protected from this incident. 3. I want it on record that Evan instructed me to coordinate a story, and that you pressured me to engage with him after compliance told me not to. My manager's jaw worked. He didn't like it, but he also knew he couldn't argue with it. "Fine," he said. "I'll talk to HR." "Copy me," I replied. I left his office without raising my voice once. That afternoon, HR scheduled a formal debrief. They used careful language, but the meaning was clear. I was cleared, my record was clean, and the company considered me a reporting party, not a subject. 2 days later, Legal sent a final note. Evan's employment was terminated for cause. The contractor was removed and TechServe's contract was under review. A suspicious activity report had been filed with the bank. Law enforcement had been contacted. Then one final detail, almost an afterthought, landed like quiet justice. The company implemented a policy change. No more single approver emergency paths for anything over a low threshold. No more after-hours contractor admin access without dual authorization. Mandatory auto-lock timing shortened. And every exception request required a written business justification with a second signer. It wasn't a trophy. It wasn't a cinematic ending. But it meant Evan couldn't just disappear and repeat the same play somewhere else without leaving fingerprints. A week later, I got a call from an unknown number. I answered out of habit. It was Evan. His voice sounded smaller than I remembered. "Mark," he said, I didn't think it would go this far. I didn't yell. I didn't gloat. I just said the only honest thing. You didn't think I'd document. You didn't think I'd send the email. You didn't think I'd show up to that room with receipts." He swallowed. I was desperate. "No," I said. "You were calculated." He tried to speak again, but I ended it. "Do not call me," I said. "If legal needs anything, they'll contact me. This is done." I hung up and sat there for a second, letting the quiet settle. And that was the real ending. Not a punchline, not revenge, peace. Because the final satisfaction wasn't watching Evan get walked out. It was knowing that when someone tried to drag my name into the dark, I didn't panic. I didn't beg. I didn't try to get aligned. I built a record. I moved first. And I walked out with my life still mine.